Hi, this is Bryan 2 in Warsaw, Poland on January 28th, approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, 3:40 in the afternoon. It's really cold outside, so I'm kind of holed up here in the hotel. It's really nice. It's Christmas season, but it's also really cold. Kind of reminds me of Germany. I want to talk about organized stalking because there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of confusion about what it is and how it works. It's real simple to understand. I'm going to say this, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Organized stalking is based on one thing. Organized stalking is based on choice reference patterns. The choice reference patterns of the target. You, the targeted individual. It's based on a previous pattern of your choices. It's called choice reference patterns. So they build a profile of you when they first start stalking you and harassing you, when you first become targeted. And then based off that profile, they station their organized stalkers at various vantage points. And the first thing I always do is spread out. Okay, they're using what's called a floating box on you. I'll explain that in just a minute. But first you have to understand what it is, and it's simply choice reference patterns. They're using a pattern of the target's previous choices on them. So in order to understand organized stalking, you have to go back and look at your own previous choices. Your favorite restaurants, cafes, shopping centers, modes of transportation, etc. And then based off of that, that's where they station the organized stalkers in order to harass you and provoke you. They're there for various reasons. They're there for surveillance. They're there to capture your attention, because each time they capture your attention, it produces a synaptic response in the brain of the mind control victim, which can be remotely measured and integrated back into R&M data. So they're constantly provoking you, getting in your face and harassing you. But it's more than that. I mean, they need to keep you from defeating the technology. For example, if you figure out some way to break the stream, for example, you get close to a generator, the high-powered generator, and you were to set up some type of a closed enclave, grounded enclave, with passive materials next to that generator. Well, that generator would produce enough electromagnetic activity bouncing off of that enclosed Faraday cage or whatever you're using, that it would cause trouble. So they would have to stop that. But they would come in and send the organized stalkers to disrupt that. So they need to keep you from defeating the technology. But it's also more than that. They're there to discredit you. Try having a reasonable conversation with anyone about the fact that 100 hostile strangers are following you. It's just not possible. Okay, it's not possible, and they know that, and that's why they do it, to discredit you. And again, to provoke you constantly into emotional responses. Because each time they provoke you into an emotional response, it produces an electromagnetic emission in your brain. Remember, you're tied to that supercomputer for life. If you're targeted with this technology, and millions are, and most 98% of the people targeted have no idea they're targeted. Hundreds of thousands of people in America are trauma-based mind control victims alone, and the majority of them don't even know they're targeted. There's all this chaos and hell on earth in their lives. Suddenly came out of nowhere, and they have no idea what happened. Okay, that's trauma-based mind control. But there are millions of people targeted with this technology. If you get online and you have a Facebook profile, okay, you're targeted with this technology. Okay, they're building a profile of you. Okay, so you think, well, it's not me, I'm not targeted. If you are using social media on the internet, you are targeted with this technology. It's just that you're not actively targeted. Okay, they're still building a profile of you, of your choices, of your patterns of behavior, etc. Okay, that's what's happening. You're targeted. You're just not actively targeted. If you're on social media, you're on Facebook, Google+, etc., you are targeted with this technology. You just don't know it. Millions of people are actively targeted with this technology and have no idea. And hundreds of thousands of Americans alone are trauma-based and have no idea. So it's based on choice reference patterns. Okay, pattern of your previous choices. Once you understand that organized stalking is based off choice reference patterns, then you need to understand what it's comprised of. Because you know what it's based on. So what is it comprised of? It's comprised of two things: situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. And those situational scenarios and conversational scenarios will always be based on events or topics that they know will capture your attention. So, you're religious, they know that. They've been able to build a profile of your habits and your behaviors, etc., determining what you will respond to. So now they engineer these situational and conversational scenarios. And they sit down next to you one day and start having a conversation out loud about God to capture your attention, produce electromagnetic emissions in your brain, which can be remotely measured and integrated back into R&M data. So these situational and conversational scenarios that are involved in organized stalking are absolutely crucial for mind control, because in the real world, there's no real effective way for them to gauge and measure the effectiveness of their neuroprogramming. It's just not possible. So using trigger stimuli, these organized stalkers, everything's highly compartmentalized. They don't know much. They're just told what to say and do, okay? They're just thugs, okay? So they sit down next to you and start having a conversation about whatever it is you'll respond to. Sports. So if you're an Atlanta Braves fan, then they'll sit down next to you and start having a conversation with someone else about the Atlanta Braves. Or if you know you love God, they'll sit down and start having a conversation out loud within your hearing about God. Or they'll come in wearing a Jesus Saves shirt. They're there to capture your attention, because each time they capture your attention, it produces a synaptic response in the victim's brain. Understand also that these organized stalkers are not dedicated to you per se, the target individual. They're dedicated to all targeted individuals who move through their area of operation. So they live, work, and play in that neighborhood. So there's a great deal of indirection and plausible deniability to be involved. So you call the police and say, this person's stalking me. And the police show up and they say, no, this person's crazy. I live, work, and play here. So you're discredited. And another thing that people start taking pictures, and they think that the pictures are somehow preventing the stalking. No, you're doing exactly what they want you to do. They want you to take a picture and to keep taking pictures. One picture is not enough. They want you to keep taking the same pictures over and over to discredit you. Never take more than one picture unless you're doing something different. Take that one picture, upload it, and go. Don't keep taking pictures of the same people doing the same things over and over, because you're discredited that way. You're doing exactly what they want you to do. Every time you click that camera, you aim a camera at them, you click that camera. That's an evoked potential. That's an electromagnetic emission, a synaptic response in your brain. You're helping them measure your brain. You're to build a cognitive model of your brain by reacting. So don't react. Just keep moving, unless they're doing something different. And of course they will, because they're not going to let you defeat their technology. But they're using a tactic called they're using several tactics. They're using what's called the floating box, which is basically picket surveillance. They will increase, they will expand, decrease, or increase the size of the floating box as you move around. So they've got you boxed in, and this box is called floating because it's constantly moving with you. Okay, it's just basic, simple picket surveillance. So the first thing they do is they always spread out. Whenever you move into a new area, you move into a new area. So the old organized stalkers will break off, and the new organized stalkers will pick you up because you just moved into a new area. And these organized stalkers are not controlled by one person. There's contractors, and the organized stalkers are paid cash under the table. Nobody knows. And the contractors that control them, basically, they're previous military, former police, etc. Somebody that has, usually private detectives, have some degree of expertise in the area of surveillance. So these are the people, and of course they must be cleared. They must have a clearance. So these organized stalkers are contractors. They're just paid cash under the table, and they're using a tactic called the floating box on you. And the floating box is basically picket surveillance. They surround you everywhere you go, and as you move, the box moves. So you're driving down the street, they'll be in front of you and behind you and in front of you and beside you, and they'll move around you constantly. It's called a floating box. Same thing when you're walking down the street, okay? And then it'll expand or decrease as you move into new areas. And they're very swift, these people. I mean, they'll have a suit in the car in case you have to go pretend like you're on Wall Street, or they'll have a pair of gym shorts in the car in case you have to go to the gym to watch you, and have a backpack in case you have to pretend to be a tourist, etc. And they're using a tactic called, and this is, they have entire wardrobes set aside in their cars for this kind of stuff. So you're not going to go just jump in a pool and try to get away from them. They've already got the situation covered. They've got their swimsuit. Okay, so you need to understand, basically, they're going to key in on whatever you're wearing. They're going to key in on some unique object, okay, like my hat, and that's how they're going to identify me, and they're going to relay that evidence. Now, the hive-mind teams communicate with each other by synthetic telepathy. Not the stalkers, not the organized stalkers. They just communicate by way of cell phones. So they're constantly relaying your position based on keying in on whatever color you're wearing, or whatever it is that's unique that you have on. and then they'll relay that information to the next person ahead of you in order to pass you off to the next individual. This is very important. This is not just not just using picket surveillance. They're using a tactic called leapfrogging. And leapfrogging is basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. Leapfrogging is passing the victim off, the target off, and then moving ahead of the target and picking them back up again. Okay, so leapfrogging is very important because if they need to pass the target up, pass you off to another person, and then move ahead of you, then they've got to move to some decision point in front of you or behind you where you're possibly going to make a move, because it's really easy to break the floating box. If you really want to really want to know you're being stalked, all you have to do is make 4 right turns. If they're still behind you after you made 4 right turns, you're absolutely being stalked. It's not your imagination. Okay, so it's easy to break the floating box. Just do a U-turn, sudden U-turns. This is the one thing they can't prepare for. Well, normally they wouldn't be able to prepare for them, but they use what's called cheating trigger vehicles. And these cheating trigger vehicles are cheating trigger foot soldiers. They're always stationed ahead of you or behind you at decision points. So, you move up, you do a U-turn, and then you head off in one direction, and then you drive down the street, suddenly you make a left turn, you think, well, I fooled them. Let me tell you, they've gotten plenty of people that way who thought they fooled them using cheating trigger vehicles and cheating trigger foot soldiers. Okay? You didn't fool them. They're waiting for you with a cheating trigger. That's what it's called. And it's called leapfrog. So, you need to understand that this is picket surveillance. They're using a tactic called a floating box on you. I'll go into this in more detail later. But people need to understand that organized stalking is very simple. It's just one thing. It's based on one thing: choice reference patterns. Okay, and it's patterning your previous choices, and that pattern will change, and that profile that they build on you will change as you change. Okay, so they're constantly updating, the pattern they're building of your choice reference patterns is constantly evolving based on your decisions, previous decisions. Those are memory references. I don't have time to go into that right now because it involves memory management. I'm trying to stick on organized stalking. So understand that while it's based on one thing, choice reference patterns, a pattern of your previous choices, it's actually comprised of 2 things, and that's situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. Okay? And these situational scenarios and conversational scenarios will always be based on events or topics that they know will capture your attention. If they cannot capture your attention, their mega billion-dollar technology fails. Everything is based upon their ability to capture the attention of the mind control victim at regular intervals throughout the day. And if they can't do that, if they can't capture your attention at regular intervals throughout the day, and a certain amount of time passes, generally a 24-hour period of time, they've got to start all over with a new verification routine. They don't want to do that. Okay? So they're actually going to use these situational and conversational scenarios to engage in conversations and situations that will capture your attention. Every time they capture your attention, it produces a synaptic response, an electromagnetic in the emission in your brain, which can be remotely measured and integrated back into RNM data. Remember, you're tied to that supercomputer for life by this information injection feedback loop, this stream of electromagnetic low frequency waves specifically tuned to your brainwave signature, interfacing with the nanotechnology in your brain. So choice reference patterns, situational and conversational scenarios based on events or topics that will capture your attention. That's how they determine, they gauge, measure the effectiveness of their neuroprogramming. Neuro-linguistic programming that's used on you at night, well, they got to determine if that's effective or not. They got to verify that technology. It's called verification. If you don't respond to those situational and conversational scenarios, then the verification process breaks apart and mind control fails. I've said this before. I'll say it again. If people get it, understand it. Verification. They got to verify their technology. So they're using these organized stalkers to engage in situational scenarios or conversational scenarios that they know are going to capture your attention. So you're an Atlanta Braves fan. They'll sit down one day next to you and start having a conversation about the Atlanta Braves. Or you're religious, they know that based on events or topics that are going to capture your attention. They're going to sit down next to you one day and start having a conversation out loud about God. They're trying to capture your attention. That's what this technology is designed to do. If they cannot capture your attention at regular intervals throughout the day, their technology fails. Okay? So to understand, that's it. Choice reference patterns, situational and conversational scenarios based on events or topics that will capture your attention. Floating box, picket surveillance, leapfrogging. Okay? That's what's happening to you. This is Bryan 2 in Warsaw, Poland, November 28, 2016.